Hello. Thank you for joining us for Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. This is episode 48, and for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, this episode we're discussing sexual assault survivors' trauma isn't a competition. My name is Neil Parekh. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. That's my co-host and inspiration and rock, Dawn Neuburg. I could go on. I could take the whole episode, Dawn, talking about how great you are and how much you mean to me. But we may need to do that for when's your birthday? When should we do that? That's
February.
Past,
right?
You
you got a ways to go.
We'll have to wait for that. We have been doing this show for almost a little more than 2 years now. This is our third year. And we started with the idea of reducing the stigma around mental health. Just to have a general conversation, to bring people on whose lived experience touches on various aspects around mental health, to bring on therapists, advocates, etc. But in April, we focus on issues surrounding people's experience with sexual assault and the mental health aspects of that. Dawn and I are both survivors of, however you want to describe it, assault, abuse, rape. All these terms are kind of thrown around. I'm just using assault, kind of a generic term, really. We're building off the conversation that we had last week, where we talked about the process of healing and how important it is to look back in order to move forward. Dawn, first I want to ask you how your week has gone. April is always challenging because there's so much going on around. Denim Day is at the end of the month, and Hope Shining Blue in Milwaukee. But you're speaking a lot. You're engaging with people. You're talking about your book, of course. What's the week been like for you?
This has been a very crazy week. Not only is it April and it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, I also am doing some consulting work and been vying for a job. But I had what I will call honor today to go and listen to a panel of survivors speak about thriving and what it means to them to have a community of support. The sexual assault survivor thriver community is very, very strong here in Milwaukee, as I'm sure it is in other places. And it is something that I absolutely appreciate to the nth degree, that there are so many people willing to step up and speak out about being survivors and what that means to them. And this panel today was just so inspiring and real. Like, people were talking real feelings, and this is hard stuff. This is really hard stuff. And Neil, last week you shared some really hard stuff. But it's so important to be real. And April is a time to do that, to be real about people's stories and circumstances.
Yeah. We were talking with Kenneth, and last week, as you mentioned, I shared a little bit more of my personal story. I've gotten, I don't want to say comfortable, but I've shared my experience being abused by a neighbor when I was 7, and what I shared for the first time. And I'm trying to frame this very intentionally, is that the abuse continued for some period of time after, and it's hard. And we've talked about this before. Memory is like Swiss cheese. I have no idea how
Yeah.
long it lasted, how many times. I just know that there were a number of other encounters with the same individual, and I thought that I was actually initiating it, or asking for it, encouraging it. But I was eight,
You were a
9, or
child.
10 years old,
Yeah,
and
you were a child.
yeah, so that's been hard, and that's not it's not something I'm really there yet. One of the things I wrote, just as a comment, you know, on my blog post, I wrote, I was 7 when he knocked on my door, and I'm thinking I'll need some time, but I might need a follow-up blog post, and the title would be "The Abuse Continued After He Left." So this is a lot.
Yeah,
This is a
it's
lot.
tough. It's tough stuff. It's tough stuff. And for anybody who's watching, again, it is April. We are talking about situations of sexual violence. So this is your trigger warning. If you need to step away, or maybe can't watch the whole episode at one time, and want to come back to it, please take care of yourself. That's the most important thing that I can say.
And of course, it's April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I want to give a quick shout out to Paula Kiger, who's watching from Tallahassee, Florida. Paula, I want to take a moment, because when I first shared my story a number of years ago, you were the first person I called around it was around the read along, and I was asking about, would this work to share this on the read along with the read along community, and I really appreciate all of your support at that time and throughout. Amy McIntyre is watching as well and says hello. Amy, thank you so much for joining us. We have two Milwaukeeites. Are they Milwaukeeans?
Milwaukeeans.
I'm going to call them Milwaukeeites. You want to introduce them?
Yes, my wonderful husband, Jim Neuburg, who is in the other room. And then my dear friend and landlord, Kate, who is downstairs. So, and they are loyal watchers and listeners and commenters. So I appreciate them very much. Absolutely.
I want to give a quick shout out to Digimentors, the production firm that I work with, social media and production firm. They give us production support for this show, and I'm always grateful for that. The tools and resources to bring this show 2 times a month. And I also want to make sure that we give a quick shout out to Patty Kroom from North Carolina. And Patty, I'm glad that you were able to tune in. I understand you were moving and still trying to set up internet for tonight. So I'm glad you're able to figure that out in time. I appreciate your comments, both on social media and in reaching out after last week's show. So this show, Dawn, as we said earlier, is really around the idea that trauma, it's not a competition. A sexual assault survivor's trauma isn't a competition. Before we bring up our guest, Cyrena Martin, can you help frame this topic for us? What do you mean? What does it mean to you when we say that trauma is not a competition?
I think that this usually works where people who have had sexual violence experiences feel that their experiences were oftentimes lesser than someone else's. So when I say competition, I'm not saying that someone feels like, hey, your situation wasn't as bad as mine. It usually doesn't work that way. It's usually the opposite. And, we talked about this when we did the prep call that, you know, I have survivor remorse, where I feel like my situation, as bad as it was, is nothing in comparison to people who have experienced long-term molestation or sexual violence as being a child. And I have to remind myself very, very often that it is not fair for me to level people's experiences. My trauma is my trauma. My story is my story. And there is no competition in that. I don't get to downplay what happened to me, because it wasn't a continual thing. So that's what we talked about, and why we're having this conversation.
And conversely, you shouldn't upplay or upgrade someone else's experience. I mean, it kind of goes both ways. And I'll say that one, and for folks who may not know, maybe watching this for the first time or coming across it, you know, Dawn's story, more than 30 years ago, she was violently raped and shot and left for dead in an alley. Um, I was abused by a neighbor when I was 7, and he came over and said he had a Cub Scout project to do, and I didn't know any better. And you know, when I described what we did, my dad very quickly realized that it wasn't a Cub Scout project. So when Dawn mentioned that she actually downplayed her own experience compared to other people, I needed a moment to collect myself, because in all the years that I've known her, Dawn, in all the years that I've known you, I've actually always thought of your experience as worse than mine. And that, you know, I was doing that comparison, even though I knew that you shouldn't, and that's not healthy, et cetera. But I always kind of put you up on that pedestal. And to hear you talk about, you know, your own perspective was really mind blowing.
That's why I'm so glad we have Cyrena on this show today, because
yeah,
it's, you know, our stories are all so different, but they're our own stories, and we experience, you know, the remnants of those situations in a lot of similar ways. So exactly. I can't wait to get her on screen.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I was going to pull up her blog post.
Great.
Just to tee it up, what she wrote for this episode: every experience deserves healing without comparison. When we compare trauma, we unintentionally create barriers to healing. Survivors may silence themselves, delay seeking help, carry shame, or question their own truth. Comparison doesn't protect, it isolates, and it reinforces the very silence we are working to break. Our guest is Cyrena Martin. Cyrena, thank you for joining us.
So glad to have you on the show, Cyrena.
Thank you both so much for the invite and for this opportunity just to have these conversations, especially in April. April is a very difficult month for so many people who unfortunately experience sexual violence in one way, form, or fashion. You know, I've been listening in, and I'm just, yeah, the idea that any experience should take precedence over another, it's not intentional. And I think it's really out of compassion for the work that we all are doing as advocates. I've been an advocate literally in the fields and hospital and in the work that I do. I never really thought of it as this comparison, but that's exactly what it is. I was putting myself and my experiences, unfortunately, there is more than one, I was putting those back burner, and really passionate and thoughtful and, you know, kind, and doing everything that I could to support others. And in that case, kind of putting myself second, which that's very unhealthy. Everybody deserves healing. Everybody's experience can have a voice to it. It's somebody could relate. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation. If I really think back to my first experience as a youth, kind of like you, Neil, a lot of it I don't remember. So I think that was part of it too. I really blacked it out. And we know that is a form of survival, that is a form of protection, unintentional again, but I really had suppressed it to the point where I didn't remember anything. It started coming back in bits and pieces and really just kind of hit me during the pandemic. There was a lot, I think there's pre-pandemic life and post-pandemic
Yeah.
life for so many of
Yeah.
us. And yeah, during that time, a lot of the experience came back to me in different flashes and different forms. And so that's when I really began to do some of my self-healing. Just remembering I was a youth. I don't know the exact age. I do remember the location, the house that we did live in, and I know it had to be, I was at least 10 because we moved, not a lot, but we did move. And the home that we were in, we lived there after the age of 10. So I know for sure it was around that age. A family member that lived with us for a period of time. And that's, when the abuse happened, middle of the night. And those experiences, they show up. They're going to show up in different ways throughout life, whether it's noticeable. I think it's, just something that we don't have control over how or when it's going to show up. So me being at that point where I did start remembering, I knew it was time to address it. It was time to get some support, counseling. Um, I did tell my mother, and a lot of that was in safety too, again, thinking of others, but wanting to make sure that this person wasn't harming anyone else in the family or even had the opportunity really to be around anybody without them knowing that this had happened to me. It was a lot to talk about, like deciding when, where, how should I tell, or so all this brought back, wow, in the work that we're doing, that's exactly how people are feeling. That's exactly the questions they're asking. So we, as a community, need to really embrace that and remember that if somebody is sharing their story, their experience, what happened to them, they need us to listen. They need our support, and they may need options. Maybe they can't do it all at that time. We want to hear it. We want them to do something about it, but they can't. They physically, mentally may not be able to do it. So that's just one of the things I was writing about when this came about, and even in that blog, like, wow, this is a topic that we can really work on, really grow in how we do things.
I was going to make that same point, Cyrena, just the idea of, and I'm, when someone is sharing their story, just try and remember that it may not be the whole story. It may be just what they can get out at that moment, just what they're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, and I think those bits and pieces, Cyrena, that you're talking about, that Neil's talking about, that that I've talked about before, in terms of not always remembering everything exactly as it happened. And that's such a safety mechanism, right? Like, it's such a protective factor. And we like blame survivors for that, when that's how they're able to thrive, is those protective factors inside of them that are keeping them safe from that trauma and that harm. And yet we're out there saying, well, that's not the story you told me, the first time that you told me. And I think that's so damning for survivors. And there's so much people can take away with and understand from conversations like these, that those are intentional protective mechanisms that we carry.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the self-blame too, Dawn.
Mhm.
That self-blame, I've seen it so often in working with survivors when they're first, coming for that first initial ready to seek some type of help, support, whatever it is, literally presenting at a hospital, not remembering and wanting to remember so bad, wanting to be able to help the situation, wanting to be able to stop it from happening to somebody else, wanting to help maybe the police, wanting to help maybe a forensic nurse. They may not even know what happened, so they don't know what to tell a nurse or the police. And then it's all happening so fast. In one day, you're being asked to tell your story several different times, several different ways, all of those things. And you may just not remember, or what you do remember, you might remember the ending, not the beginning. There's so many different ways it can come across. So just giving them that grace, giving them that time, um, and just being supportive, like you said, listening is going to be the key.
Yeah. So Cyrena, te- share with everybody the second piece of this puzzle for you. The piece that, kind of got us both to a place where we were like, oh, we both have this survivor's remorse, this like weird feeling that, our story isn't quite the same as, everybody else's. So why don't you share some about that?
Sure. Yeah, when we were speaking, and that's part of my story. I didn't remember for so long, so I didn't even share about the childhood experience. I would share that I am a two-time survivor of dating rape, and escape. But to me, it's a sexual
It's
violence.
still, yeah.
It's definitely sexual violence. Maybe not penetration. That's what we seem to,
Yeah.
that's the definition, has to include penetration of some sort. But in my experience, it did not. However, the fear, the, um, yeah, the violence, it still was violent. It still was a violation of my space, all of those things. So yeah, I did, and I didn't report, and I didn't say anything. So that's where that remorse kind of came in. Well, I didn't do anything about it, so maybe it wasn't as bad as somebody who was able to, seek that support or seek that help from others. So I kind of, yeah, I downplayed it a little bit. Not, but it's, to me, it's horrific. And if somebody else had been telling me that, I would feel horrible and be doing everything I could to try to support them. So, and not doing that for myself, that was really an eye opener. And that's really kind of when I began in this work. Like, people really do need to hear all of our experiences. Who knows who's in their home suffering in silence?
Yeah.
I want to ask, and just to clarify, you made that point, Cyrena. Is that a legal threshold for something like date rape, or that there has to be penetration?
There's so many different levels. Oh, we could get complicated. There's
Yeah.
a lot, but I think even before we go there, it's the stigma. It's the what we perceive and how we think others are going to perceive.
Sure.
I think before it even gets to the legal ramifications, like the same in domestic violence. If it's physical, people are like, oh my God, but who's calling 911 and saying, hey, I've been verbally abused? Hey, I've been
Yeah.
financially abused, mentally controlled, and those things. I think it's kind of where those, you're not comparing, but you're feeling or perceiving there's a comparison there, that it's not as serious. But to that person it's happening to, it's fear. It's
It is.
devastating.
The reason I was asking is that I'm wondering if, I mean, yes, the self-perception of how valid or how real that experience is. Um, I was making the assumption that some of that is influenced by how law enforcement or the authorities or society, I mean, fill in the blank, is going to respond to your story. So if you come forward
Mhm.
and say this happened, right? What you any examples you mentioned, I was
Mhm.
abused emotionally or financially, or someone if I was on a date or in a intimate situation and someone uh,
Cross the
pressured or
line.
forced across the line, right?
Yes,
Um, in
absolutely.
different circumstances, in different circles, you're going to have a different response. Uh,
I
that might
definitely,
influence.
yeah. I think even years back, like there was no sexual assault of a husband wife. That just
Yeah.
wasn't, you couldn't, it didn't happen. There was
Yeah,
no ramifications. There was no point of reporting it at that point because there was nothing that was not considered a violation. So I think, yeah, as the years went on, I think that's still what people are, you know, in your mind, or you're like, well, I did go out on this date. We did talk on the phone for a long period of time or text now or communicate. And then now you're feeling somewhat responsible, I think, for what happened. You did
yeah,
get into the car with this person, or you did meet them somewhere. So now you're dealing with, wow, I should have known better, or I should have, could have, would have, all of those things. That
sure,
self-blame really starts kicking in.
sure. I want to take a moment to welcome some of the folks who are watching, who've joined us. Um, Deborah Kerr is listening rather, from Fort Lauderdale. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us. And my mom is watching from Hastings on Hudson. You mentioned, Dawn, that Jim and Kate are loyal viewers. I think
Yes.
the three of them with my mom are probably that core group. Um, Apollo is watching from Philadelphia, a colleague of mine. Thank you so much, Apollo. Your support has been great, and I want to give you that shout out again, Dawn. If you remember, after our episode after New Year's, where we talked about checking in on friends, Apollo made
Yeah.
it a point to check in on me several times to see how I was doing, and that meant a lot, Apollo. Appreciate that. I also want to give a shout out to Srinivasan. Says thank you for sharing. Appreciate all three of you. Sri, as you know, is the CEO of Digimentors, the firm that I work with, and we get production support for the show. Um, so always want to thank Digimentors and my colleagues at Digimentors for helping to promote the show, to share, comment. Several of the folks watching today, in fact, are from that group. Paula Kiger, a longtime colleague, and I mentioned Apollo, as well as, of course, Sri too. Um, so one of the things that we like to do, and what we're trying to do, at episode 48, we're getting really close to episode 50, which is going to fall in May, Mental Health Awareness Month. But what we're trying to do is to build a community of like-minded people who are, in a position to support each other and who have a certain empathy for, not just we're focusing on sexual assault today and last week, but mental health in general. Anything we can do to um, lower that stigma, to create more uh, empathy and more space, just even in our own circles. The way we talk about mental health, the way we respond when we hear about someone's experience. If we can make small changes like that, I think it would make a big difference. I want to bring in Dawn. You talk about survivors' remorse. You mentioned it a few times. I want to bring in your blog post. Survivor's remorse is real, even for longtime advocates. And this is, what I was surprised when you mentioned this and I heard this. I have survivor's remorse. Of course, this is in Dawn's voice. Every time I hear a story about someone who was abused from the time they were 5 to 15 by a relative or a family friend, I think about how lucky I am. I want to make sure folks are sitting down for the last part of this sentence. I want folks to know how lucky I am. I was raped once for about an hour. But Dawn considers herself lucky.
I do.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I think that one of the things that comes up for people is this whole question of how your experience is different from someone else's, and it's whatever you're tracking on, whether it's age or violence or being shot while it's happening. I'm gonna push a little bit and play devil's advocate. How is being shot not worse than like a lot of people's experiences? I mean, you were shot in the head, Dawn. How is that not like? I, for years, have always thought of your story as, frankly, worse than mine. I was abused once, or I need to start changing my story.
Yep. Yes.
Damn it. I was abused repeatedly over years.
You were.
Yeah.
But I was never shot. So how is that not worse?
Well, again, this is why we call it survivor's remorse, right? I can't explain the feelings, where they come from. But what I do know is that I have to remind myself often that this is my story, and I own it. And the way that I feel about what happened to me changes all the time. Sometimes there's a very strong piece of me that says, I have all of these mental health issues because of my circumstances and what happened to me, and that's okay. And I respect that, and I understand that about my situation and my circumstances. Other times, like Neil, when you were just talking and getting, choked up and feeling the way that you're feeling about really remembering that you were a child and what happened to you was not your fault and it happened multiple times. That's where when I think about what happened to me, I feel very fortunate, because I have that one thing to deal with, and that's the only thing I have to deal with, right? Like when I hear Cyrena and her story as a child, but then also her, attempted rapes that she was able to get away from. Like to me, when I think about that, that's just absolutely terrifying to me. Like I can't imagine the kind of trauma that would elicit to be in a situation where you could have potentially been really, really, really harmed by another individual, and you had to find a way to get yourself safe, right? That to me is so scary, and feels very different. But as we all talked about when we had our prep call, the way we process and the experiences we've had have really shaped who we are as people. And there, you know, I'm sure we've all experienced some type of mental health issues, and, you know, PTSD, and, you know, memory lapse, and, you know, I know for me, I've had some poor coping mechanisms in my life. You know, things that I'm not proud of, things that I wish, you know, weren't things that I've done, but I did because that was the only way I could cope at that time. So I think that it's not really dismissing what happened to me. It's just remembering that other people have had experiences that that they have to deal with in the ways that they have to deal with them. That I'm not the only one, you know, because I had that when, you know, I was 21 when this happened to me. And for a while, I thought I was the only one on the planet who ever experienced anything like that, right? Like, I didn't know I was 21. I didn't realize that this was more commonplace, and that, you know, small children got abused, and that, you know, people got, you know, raped on dates, and this happened at colleges. I didn't know any of that at the time.
Mhm.
I was in this small little bubble of where I thought that I was the only one on the planet. So, so I feel really honored when someone shares their story with me, because that's a really personal, private thing. And not everyone can get up on a platform and share with the world, you know, what happened to them. So that was my soapbox. Sorry, it was a little longer than I intended.
No,
That
that's
was
fine.
beautiful.
That's
Mhm.
fine. I
Yeah.
think the bottom line for all of this is that we're all still learning, and we're all still, you know, trying to figure out what this means. Um, and as we, you know, continue to look back, I mean, that was the theme from last week's episode with Kenneth Rogers. If folks missed it, they can find it on my website. But you know, it was um, looking back, moving forward, the cycles of healing after sexual assault. And I think that was a very profound kind of first step for all of us. You know, Dawn, you wrote a book about your experience. You know, Cyrena, you talked about having to try and you know, think about those memories to try and piece things together so that you could share your earlier experiences.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you know, I, similar to you, and I actually had you know, it works out because I see my therapist on Thursdays, you know, earlier before the show in the afternoon, and we were talking about this, and it was hard because I have no um, details. I have no understanding of. I mean, all I know is that it happened over summers, maybe 2 or 3 summers, because we were outside. We couldn't have been inside. You know, like I have no idea how many times, how frequently, how long it went for, and you know, it's, even though I'm not trying to um, make a case anywhere, or I'm not trying to write a book, or I'm not trying, but even just for my own benefit, I feel like I'm grasping it at sand, like I have nothing to hold on to. Um,
Mhm.
and that's hard.
Mhm.
That's hard. I know, Dawn, you talked about not having memories, right,
No, yeah.
from earlier.
Yeah. I have very shoddy, you know, very, very sparse memories of my life in general before I got raped. Very, very. It's almost like my whole life stopped and a new life began, and nothing before that really exists in my memories, which is
Mhm.
yeah, super frustrating. I'm like, okay, if you got rid of the bad stuff, that's great, but can I remember some of the good stuff? Like,
Exactly.
I've said before, I'll run into high school friends and they'll be like, oh, do you remember that party we went to when we were, 16 and we did this and this? And I'll be like, nope, no recollection. My very best friend who I've had since I was literally born will bring up things all the time from our childhood. Oh, do you remember when we snuck out and we went and did this? And nothing. I have no recollection. And it's very, very frustrating.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's
I was
something they say. Whoop. Like with
Yep, go
trauma,
ahead.
that's what they say. Some people are stuck in some ways at the age of when it happened. Part of their mind stays there. So that's, or blocks it out, or both. It can be
Yep.
so, it's ingrained now in our brains. And I think that's a difficult part in healing, not being able to remember. It's like, if we could remember it, maybe we could get past it. But if you can't remember it, what are you getting past? So it's kind of like this circle. I can recall working with several survivors and them having a substance-induced sexual assault. So they were maybe drugged in a way. And that was the biggest thing. Like, I can't remember what happened, but they know something happened, and trying to explain that to, a police officer or somebody, and you're literally had just gone through it, I'm just trying to support them and saying, hey, you may never remember this, but just know that you're believed, just know that you're support, know that you're worthy, all of those things. But yeah, at that moment, they're like, I just don't remember.
I think that's the hardest thing about sexual assault in comparison to any other trauma that there is out there, and there is lots of it, is that it is one of the hardest things to prove. There is often no physical, I mean, even a rape kit, right? You're going to a hospital to get a rape kit done because you're saying this person violated me. But if that person is saying, nope, that was consensual, nope, it's my word against that other person's word.
Yeah.
And so even if there's, evidence of penetration or whatever, if that's, the type of assault that you had, that doesn't necessarily mean that can be proven in a court of law.
Exactly. And sexual violence is probably the only where the victim, survivor, has to prove it. If there's a theft, you don't have to, everything is done by someone else. There's an investigation, there's all of these things. But in this situation where it's sexual violence, sexual abuse, you have a lot of work to do. And are you up for that? Are you up to going to court? Are you up to have your whole life analyzed? What were you doing there? What were you wearing? Denim day? All of these things. You have to prove that you are a victim. We don't say that to somebody who's been robbed. We don't say that to even a car, all of these things, I don't think, criminal act. But in sexual violence, there's some victim blaming in some way, form, or fashion. You have to prove it.
I always say that. Let me just.
Go ahead, Dawn.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make this one point. I always say that, there's so much victim blaming in this area that, like, if I were to get into a car accident and break my arm, no one's going to ask me why I got in the car. No one's going to ask me that question, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, in all these other ways, there's just so much victim blaming. It's ridiculous. Sorry, Neil, go ahead.
No, I was going to actually just have Cyrena, because she brought it up. I mentioned it much earlier in the show, but you mentioned Denim Day in this context of victim blaming. Can you please share, for folks who may not be familiar with Denim Day,
Sure.
what that's about?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember the exact year. It's in the 80s, I think 88. It was a woman who was raped, sexual violence, and the person was convicted. Then it went all the way to Supreme Court, and the decision was overturned that the person was not guilty because the woman who was raped was wearing jeans, assumed to be tight jeans, and must have assisted in taking them off during a rape, a sexual assault, and I believe there was a weapon as well. So that's victim blaming. You're not a participant at all in sexual violence. There's no reason, whatever you're wearing. I say it all the time. And when I'm working with survivors and they self blame, I'm like, no, no one has the right to violate or to touch you. If you're buck naked walking down the street, that's your business. We normally don't do that, but no one should be violating you. What you have on, what you're wearing, where you're at, what you've drank, what you've eaten has nothing to do with this sexual violence and abuse. So Denim Day, we wear denim coming up Wednesday, April 29th, in support of ending victim blaming.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
like Dawn's reference though. Yeah, like you're in a car accident, no one's asking you any questions of what you were doing, even if you were the one that caused the accident.
Yeah. Yeah. Cyrena,
So,
maybe you could talk a little bit about your advocacy work, because what I think, I don't even know how we first met. I don't even recall how we actually first met for the first time, but it was in an advocacy space, I'm sure. But talk a little bit about the work that you do with Mahogany Cares.
sure. I think we may have met through our coalition doing the
Oh,
work. I
yes, that is correct.
believe some years ago.
Yes,
Yes, through our
that is
sexual assault
correct.
coalition. Yes, I am a founder and of a nonprofit, Mahogany Cares. We work with those who've experienced sexual or domestic violence. We started doing more of the crisis work, and now we're working on healing and working on, people being well after experiencing such horrific acts of violence. So we do support groups, we do activities, we do awareness and prevention work. We support survivors. We do advocacy work. We go to Madison. As much as we can, we try to change legislation as much as we can. We support other organizations in our community and throughout the United States. Um, this is something, sexual violence especially, has not been given the platform, the attention, the support, the all of those things that it needs. It's one of those, it's happening, but people are kind of acting like it's not happening. And the numbers are only the numbers that are reported. Those are astronomical numbers, but there's so many who've never said a word, living
Sure.
in their homes, living day to day in pain, in fear, never not being able to have that voice, um, not being able to, function if they're not getting that healing support, counseling. We've talked about it here. All of us are proud to be seeing a counselor. I think everybody should see a counselor, but that's me. But you have to get there. And the beginning of healing, I don't know how it happens. It's just one day you're like, I want to be well. I just can't continue like this anymore. You may not even know, like we're saying, if you don't even have the memory of it, why aren't you well? Why are you feeling depressed? Why are you isolating? Why are you having all these symptoms, even being exhausted? Your
Mhm.
mind is never resting. But
Yeah.
if you're not engaging in some type of healing and wellness, it's continuing. So we want to be a safe space for those who've experienced sexual violence. You don't have to tell us what happened. You can just come, listen, relax. Hopefully, we can provide some skills or tools. So one day, one moment, even at a time, you're feeling a little bit better. We want to go from A to Z. We want to be like, fix it. But it's going to take some work. It's going to take some time.
If you can imagine, Cyrena, before we launched this show in February of 2024, Dawn, 24.
Yeah.
I had never said the words, I see a therapist out loud. I had never spoke about the anxiety and occasional depression that I experience, and which is since the last year I was diagnosed with ADHD, and realized that a lot of that actually comes from, it's an outgrowth of my ADHD experience and symptoms. But I'd never talked about mental health publicly, and it was after doing hosting a show with Candice, season 3 of her show, Unspoken Conversations with Candice. She dedicated to male survivors of sexual abuse after hearing my story. And I co-hosted and produced the show with her. And mental health kept coming up when we were interviewing different guests. And so, just that idea, it was a throwaway comment of, and I mentioned seeing my therapist. I mean, just the idea that I would be talking in public and mention casually that I saw my therapist, or much less, as Dawn knows, in January, I introduced the world, my world, my online world, to the therapist that I saw in Seattle for 10 years, Dr. Michael Kane. That was unheard of for me. So just in terms of how challenging it is for people to say those words out loud, the stigma is still very real.
Definitely.
To talk about your own mental health, to talk about seeing a therapist. In some circles, it's pretty standard or okay. I'll just share that we had a guest on, a former colleague of mine from Seattle, who worked at United Way and went on to become a therapist. And she sees mostly young girls, teenagers, and young adults. And she talked about how teenagers, high school students, sit at the cafeteria trading tips from their own therapists as you would trade makeup or hair tips with each other, or the latest Netflix shows you're watching. It was that normalized to talk about it. So that was a real eye opener for me.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, Neil, I know, we were talking about the comparison to different things. Male has been, that's something we're like, I felt like that was much, it's not talked about as much. So maybe not the violence, but the being able to find a support system or find some place that's safe to even talk about it or get any help would be much harder. That was part of my, I think, remorse too, male or child too. Sometimes it's children should be seen and not heard and different things like that. So it's just all of these things that give us a reason to say, hey, this is what we should be doing right now. This is the person we should be supporting right now when we need to be supporting everybody. And creating these safe spaces, it's making a difference. It's making a difference. Seeing all the different experiences, hearing about them, not in detail, which can be triggering for some people, but just knowing, yeah, somebody else went through that. Somebody else has experienced and wasn't okay for a while, but now they're doing the work. It's okay to have those moments where you're just not okay, even if you don't know why. Let's give
Yeah.
them some room to begin this healing process.
Kate
Yeah, I think,
says that it's such an important point. Not remembering hinders healing. And she says, thank you for that. Deborah Kate said, good talk. So thank you, Deborah. Dawn, you were going to say?
I was just gonna say that I think, you know, when I went to this panel discussion today, one of the things that everybody was talking about is like, you know, people like you, Cyrena, and myself, and other advocates. Sometimes we put all of our heart and soul into helping other people, that we leave ourselves behind sometimes. And I think, you know, it's a really good reminder that if you are an empath and you are someone who spends a lot of time caring for other people, that it's important that you focus on you, and take care of yourself, because sometimes we get lost in the mix of helping other people and forget the importance of healing the inner person in us, because it doesn't stop. Like you're not just healed one day, you don't just wake up and, well, I put in the work, here I am, everything's better now. That's just not how that works. And that shift back and forth and that roller coaster ride of trauma, putting ourselves in front, isn't always a bad thing, and taking care of us is just as important as us taking care of others.
And Amy, my sister, agrees with you, Dawn, on that point. She says sometimes she needs to recharge her batteries and recalibrate, and that's certainly important. Keeping it in the family, my mom said this is like group therapy, which I certainly have thought about that, not just in terms of kind of the three of us, but over time I've learned a lot from these sessions, and really it's helped me kind of work through several issues. So this has been great, and especially with all the people watching. As we approach the end of the show, Dawn, I want to get back to something that we used to do more frequently, is to share some data, some statistics. So for Mental Health Awareness Month, sexual assault awareness month, we have some data points from RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, and I'm running their number across the bottom. Out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, 975 perpetrators will walk free. Only 310 are reported to the police. 50 reports lead to arrests. 28 cases will lead to a felony conviction, and on 25 will be incarcerated. That's out of 1,000. And to your point, Cyrena, how much of that is based on this idea of someone feeling like their experience wasn't, the same as someone else's? How much of that is based on the police and the authorities and the legal system doing exactly what we've tried this show to encourage people not to do, to not compare one against the other? I have to assume that it happens every day, and that people who are in power to do something, are making those judgments, every day of the week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then adding on, like in my case, who wants family member or person of your community to be in trouble, or you have to face them and go through this trial, if there's even going to be a trial based on those numbers we just saw. But a lot we know with children, and most sexual assaults are by someone you know. We have that stat. They're by someone you know. So that's a whole nother comparison of, do you want to get this person in trouble? Who is this person? Are they a prestigious person? Are they the family matriarch? What's really going on? So that's the interesting part of this too. In the comparison, I think, who it is. And ours were all different, but we all were thinking the other person's was rating a little bit more urgent, or whatever the word is. I don't think we can compare, like, I don't know. It really isn't a comparison of worse or better. They're all horrible, but it was a comparison of what needs to be done, and mine can wait type of thing. Or I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to remind people that May will be Mental Health Awareness Month, and we'll be hosting shows on May 14th and May 28th, back to our regular second and fourth Thursdays of the month. I will say that a colleague of mine mentioned, Dawn, that when I told him about Mental Health Awareness Month, he said, "Well, isn't every month Mental Health Awareness Month for Shining Light on Shadows?"
It is.
I think that was the right call. So Cyrena, again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for helping be a part of this conversation of trying to ensure that everyone's trauma is, their own and treated equally. We're not comparing one against the other. I am so sorry about what happened, both when you were younger and also when you were older, in terms of the date rape situations. And I'm just hoping that this is going to help. Hopefully, someone hearing the show, watching the show, might feel like what happened to them mattered. And it's not that they have to report it, but that even if they themselves understand that was a valid experience. Patty says, another impactful show. The open, honest conversations are, as someone else said, like a group therapy session. So thank you for that, Patty. And my mom says, very good guest, gave a lot of details. So thank you, Cyrena. We will see everyone in May. And Dawn, good luck with the events coming up in the next few weeks. I know you're going to be really busy.
Thanks. So Cyrena.
And Cyrena too, right?
Yes.
Thanks so much, Cyrena.
Hopefully I'll get back out to Milwaukee for a denim day in these coming years.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.